We've got here an old Epiphone Pathfinder. Looks to be late 50s, early 60s because it's built like similar period Gibsons, probably the same factory. Let's see, according to the owner, needs a ground and power cable. I agree. Needs a pilot light bulb. The pilot lamp's out, that's no problem. Needs new feet. I already took off the old feet. They were all degraded and rusty. That was a fight that was best done off camera. Amp stopped working after I inadvertently left it on for a few days. Got my attention by making a hum steady and somewhat loud sound. Last time I was playing, noticed the reverb was sounding weak and fritzy and distorted. Maybe the entire signal was starting to sound that way too. Ordinarily, the reverb sounds large, rich, and smooth. And it's got some Tolex damage I will turn my attention to later. Let's get started on this thing. First of all, it's got 4 large electrolytics. These 3 are non-original. These look to have been changed in the 80s. I think the bypass cap on the cathode and the cathode resistor were also changed at that time. It's got some original electrolytics here in the preamp, and this is a 2-section cap. One section of which was disconnected, probably replaced with this, but one original section of this old cap from 60 or whenever was still left in the amp. So the first things first, I want to take my meter and make sure nothing's waiting for us inside. And with amps like this, where a wire can become disconnected, I can have no voltage on these caps, but have 300 volts waiting for me here. I'd have to be sure of each one. All right, so no voltage waiting for us. We can get started. Step 1 is this non-grounded power cable. I'm going to cut them off, leaving about 2 inches or so still connected where they go, so I know where they go. And I'll just pull this up. It's got a rubber grommet in the chassis, which is not very safe. This one hasn't degraded fully, but it's very common for those old rubber grommets to degrade over the decades. Then you have a nice sharp metal edge for the power cable to run across and get nicks and scrapes in and short. So we'll be changing that out for a higher quality cable clamp that won't degrade. All right, so original power cable is out. That will make doing the rest of the work fairly simple. And I'll be taking some measurements. I need to see what this cap is after I get it disconnected from the clamp that's holding in place. This cap, 20 microfarad, 500 volts. Good, I've got lots of those. I'll put the cable to the side, and I'll show you the other thing that is probably associated with the issues this amp had. In here, you can see that the negative tab broke off the speaker from these wires having too much tension on them. And I can see that there's an old wire here attached. So this used to have some different wiring attached to it. Maybe that's what stressed it out. Anyway, that's just a small bit of metal, and if it flexes back and forth, it will do this. Fortunately, there is another little bit there that I can bend up and attach the wire to that, so we don't have to do anything heroic. It'll just have some battle scars. But this has to be connected for this amp's output to work well, because if that thing was intermittent, it would probably take out one of the power tubes, and that's probably what the owner was hearing, to the point where it eventually blew a fuse or something. So we'll find out. Given how much this foot switch cable wants to get in the way of everything, I suspect that it might have contributed to this stress. I'm trying to move this out of the way as much as I can. Tuck it up on these preamp tubes up there, so I have access in this area with the soldering stuff. I'm going to flow some fresh solder on this old yucky joint on this positive terminal. And this solder is so covered in dirt and corrosion that it doesn't want to flow, but there it goes. I have it up on the side, both so you can see it as far as the light hitting it and all, but also so any solder drips fall down on the wooden inside, not on the speaker cone. So that was just hanging on by a thread. That will have to be redone. There's some old stuff hanging onto this one. Fun working with that magnet there. Come on. It's a strong little magnet. He likes these pliers. Well, I can't see this well enough with the camera here in my way, so I'll show you the after in just a second. Much better. Sorry I couldn't take you along on the entire ride. That one's a little bit loose. I can see that the solder joint that holds the wire going to the cone is loose in that terminal. So I'm going to reflow that area too. And then I'll show you the after. But in this very limited space here, I can either have great camera access or have great access to my tools and be able to see what I'm doing and do a good job. So the amp itself always has to come ahead of the video. I'm sure you understand. If it were your amp, you'd want it to be the same. So let me touch up this little place with this. It's just a little bit weak there. All good now. Doesn't have all that wobble. It's very tricky working on this solder joint. I don't recommend it to most people because if the wire inside there pulls into inside the basket, it can be hard to fish it back into place and all that stuff. I mean, it's doable, but it's a pain. So it's much better to not disturb this solder joint here where the wire to the cone connects here. But sometimes we have to. So just take your time and really think about what you're doing. All right, let's get started inside. So very crucially, here on this resistor, this 470 ohm resistor, there's a crack in it. And it's just got some discoloration. It actually measures 300 something ohms, not 470. And that crack is an indication that all is not well. That resistor takes the place of a choke in this amp. So let me go in here and get some of the stuff out of the way so I can really see what's going on behind these big caps. And I know where they connect. This one's a bit tricky at the ground connection. You can see it's just kind of wrapped around that wire there. Let me do it right here. And this bias resistor looks like a 270 ohm. That makes sense. And its cap, I'm going to replace all that at once as well. So I'll just snip, I guess here. Get in there. So I've got the camera between me and the work. And I'm leaving these leads a little bit long so that I have some slack because I'm going to work at the tube socket pins. I don't want to put any stress on things. So I'll go ahead and snip that bad 470 as well. And over here it's a 4.7K that I'll also be replacing. I'm just going to cut it one side. Same thing here. I know that goes to ground right there. And I can see it's going to the connection on the board there. Let me take some of the stress off that connection. And same for this old cap, which connects to the board here behind this resistor. Make sure I've got the right one. It's really hard to see. Yeah, that's the right one. And then it connects to the ground at that input jack. I'll cut that with some extra length left, and I'll be able to, it's hard to reach in there. I'm working left-handed with the camera in between me and the work. And I need to remove this nut to get this hardware out. And let's see, is it a number 8? Looks like it might be a number 8. There we go. I'd say this is riveting to watch, but it's not. It's actually screws. Well, getting that screw out was going to be very difficult. I have to remove the chassis, and there's only so much time I want to put into this for the owner's sake. I want to do what's necessary. So I cut the old leads off, flush, and we're just going to hope that that doesn't ever spew anything. If it does, it'll drip over here onto this metal and not affect anything else. Before I do anything else, so look how dirty this is. I mean, there's a lot of dirt in here, and there's like insect eggs left on stuff. So I'm going to be getting in here with some isopropyl in a little bit. But first, I'm going to get some of the old components out and some of the old solder out so that when I go in here with isopropyl, I'll be cleaning a lot of surfaces at once. And as this is far from my first Gibson rodeo, I know that I do not want to use a solder sucker on these tabs. These little tabs break off. I'll be very carefully using some tools, some solder, and some desoldering braid. This one looks like it might just be tack soldered in place. And I can't do all this work with the camera here because I need to be very close to see for the delicate stuff. So let's see if this one is just kind of tack soldered in place. It feels like it. right. It's got a little hook that I will need to see up close. But let me show you what I mean by using the braid for this, because I can just not apply any pressure. I mean, there's some contact. Just making contact between the braid and the old solder. And it will just wick it all up. And then I'll be able to see just bare wires wrapped around the terminals and be able to get all this out neatly. Let me do this one and I'll show you what it looks like after this stuff is out. And then I've got some work to do that I can't really film very easily. All right, I was able to get those old cap connections off here and here on either side of this 10K dropper. And this 10K measures fine. So everything's very clean. And I've gotten this bypass cap out and that bypass cap out. I will show you one more thing on here with the soldering. I'll show you how to remove these bypass caps. And it gives a better idea of how delicate you need to be on these old boards at Gibson, and in this case, Epiphone we're using. And I'm very jealous of Marshall over there at Wristwatch Revival. He shows the most amazing, beyond macro, just extreme close-up stuff all the time, routinely, while he's working around like at least 2, if not more, cameras and a microscope. I wish I could show you that kind of detail. Let me poke my head in there, make sure I got everything. Yeah, very clean up here, very clean down here, and the old cap just fell out. And none of that involved any pressure, because these things will snap. All the work that I knew I'd absolutely have to do is done. So it's got all the new cathode bypass resistors. Got one of the filter caps tucked in here, out of the way. Another one tucked over here. Everything cleaned. Tube sockets cleaned. Filter cap here. New 470 ohm, that's a 2 watt. New 4.7K, that's also a 2 watt, that's not necessary. I did not have a 5 watt 270 ohm, but I did have this 10 watt, which is right here, and I've got a 22 microfarad parallel with it beneath here. So this thing, if it gets any heat at all and the heat rises, it'll be away from this cap, taking advantage of the existing ground points on the tube sockets here for some of this stuff. And a new grounded power cable with the good clamp here. The neutral is tied into this primary here at this unused pin on the rectifier. The hot is going to the fuse, then to the power switch, and the ground is the longest of the 3 wires, and it is going to chassis here, right where the shield on the output transformer is going as well. And I should point out that the HT center tap and the first filter cap, the reservoir cap, are going to ground together, separate from everything else. Confirm the fuse is good. New pilot light. I've got it plugged in with the light bulb limiter. Let's turn this thing on for the first time since we've gotten this far. It's got a 5Y3 here, a pair of 6V6s. I'll be watching those for any light shows. Let's power it on. I'm using the current limiter. I've got the volume off, the loudness. Let's see. Treble bass in the middle, reverbed off. Tremolo off. I'm not seeing any current surges. The hum dissipated as the 2 tubes started to draw about the same amount of current. The heaters are working. Not hearing any hiss as I turn the volume up, though. All right. So I expect we probably have a bad 6EU7 in here. And these 2 6EU7s are warm, and this one for the preamp is really cold. When I touch it, though, I hear a buzz coming through. So it's possible we have a bad 6EU7. Let me get up the schematic and see what I'm looking at here. Well, frustratingly, I moved some wires over in this area, and it all came to life, so I need to see if there's a bad solder joint over there. I'll check that out in a minute. Let's do an overview of what the amp sounds like in general, though. So let's see what we need to do next. So overall, that's really promising. I'm going to go in there and check some solder joints like I mentioned, and there was a little bit of a buzzy sound. I'll go through and make sure all the hardware holding the cabinet together is tight and the hardware on the speaker is tight. Hopefully the speaker's okay. It's a C12R, so it should be in good shape. It seems to be, but it could be some speaker buzz. I'll get that checked out. What a great place to be after doing this initial round of work and knowing that what's left cannot be anything major. Before I take it off the bench, I'll be checking over here where that this tube was cold, probably the heater connection, because that tube's quite warm now. But anyway, that's another way to test things. I think we'll end the video here, and we'll have another video on this amp where you get to really hear it. Until then, thanks for watching.